Biden has won the popular vote and the Electoral College, but President Trump's legal challenges in several states continue. We're talking with two Connecticut lawyers who can tell us what a recount looks like from the inside.
Congresswoman JAHANA Hayes wins a second term. She's looking back on that race and looking forward to her return to Washington.
And Pennsylvania has been at the center of the storm this election. Former WFSB investigative reporter Jeff Cole joins us. He's been on the ground in the Keystone State and was with Biden on election night.
It's all ahead, Sunday, November 8th, 2020.
From Eyewitness News, this is Face the State, Connecticut's most watched local political program.
Good morning, I'm Doobie McDowell.
And I'm Kevin Rennie. Welcome to this special live edition of Face the State. Recounts loom in the race for president. We'll be joined by a veteran of the 2000 Bush versus Gore contest in Florida, plus a Connecticut Democrat who is standing by to parachute into any state where there's a dispute.
But first, to tell us where things stand at 8:30 a.m. this morning, Yale political science professor Jacob Hacker joins us. Good morning, Professor.
Good morning.
Any other year with somebody leading in the popular vote in the Electoral College the way President-elect Joe Biden is, this race would be over. But is this race over?
Well, for all intents and purposes, this race is over. In terms of who will be the next president of the United States, we know that now is Joe Biden. But of course, there are legal challenges ongoing, and we have a president in the White House right now who is not conceding defeat. That's pretty much unprecedented. If you go back to the 2000 recount, that was really a case in which we had two candidates, of course, who weren't in the White House. And it was only one state. There's a number of states where the president will be bringing legal challenges.
So because 2000 was only one state, and now there are the Trump team is talking about 4 states. What are the challenges that they face in pursuing their what appears to be a strategy of recounts?
The challenges are immense, and let's just be frank, the president's legal team is not exactly the sort of Perry Mason of law. So I suspect that they're going to face a lot of hurdles and are not going to have a particularly good show of it. But I do worry a lot about the kind of toxic environment that's being created here. And I think that's something that we all should be worried about. This has been a very, very, very polarized election, and it would be great if we could move toward some degree of unity now.
Can you describe the challenge ahead for President-elect Biden with the divided Congress?
Yeah, so the question mark before us is really what's going to happen in the Senate. It's now clear that Georgia will decide whether or not the Senate might narrowly be in Democrats' hands. For those who don't know, the tie-breaking vote is cast by the vice president. So it was a historic moment when the new vice president is an African-American and also South Asian and a woman. And she'll also perhaps be the tie-breaking vote in the Senate if Democrats can get close enough. But that's a long shot. And I think it's going to be a very challenging environment for the president. If they don't have a working Senate majority, that means Mitch McConnell will be deciding a lot of what happens in the Biden presidency.
With just about 30 seconds to go, what tools does President Trump have that we should expect to see from him in these next 10 weeks?
Well, I've been encouraged that some of his media channels have been, if not shut down, at least, jammed a bit. But no, look, this party has developed a kind of politics of outrage, and the president is very skilled at generating outrage. So beyond the legal challenges is simply the fact that we're going to have a kind of ongoing discrediting or attempt to discredit the election. And let's just try to look back past that right now and enjoy the fact that we had a violence-free election that has produced a relatively clear winner.
Thank you very much, Professor Hacker, for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Now to our next guest. Scott Slifka is the former longtime mayor of West Hartford. He's currently in the middle of presidential politics as a member of the Biden voter protection team.
Mayor Slifka, we understand you've been working with the Democrats in Texas this week, which we thought would be interesting to have you mention because it kind of describes what kind of work you will be doing.
Good morning, Doobie. Good morning, Kevin. And thank you very much for having me from my home studio here. So yes, I did work in the Texas team. This being 2020, it was not the normal way you do this. Normally, there's a parlance you'd hear called the boiler room, and it would be a number of officials, usually lawyers, who'd be in a room physically taking in all of the issues that arise on election day and trying to address them in real time. This being 2020, I was not physically in Texas, nor was hardly anybody else. It was all essentially like a 15-hour Zoom call, and we did the same kind of work.
So your voter protection is sort of the first step, and then come challenges after the votes are counted.
On election day, you're working on things about making sure people are allowed to cast the ballot legally. So it runs the gamut from, does the polling place open on time, to do they have enough ballots, to can somebody who perhaps doesn't speak English as a first language get assistance, all the way to, is somebody actually told, no, you're not allowed to cast a ballot? And in this case, quite often now, provisional ballots are in place. And we deal with a number of those all day. And frankly, he said, it was in a red state, but things went relatively smoothly, which was good to see and is good to say about election integrity.
So despite the pandemic, do you see yourself flying down physically to certain locations? And being involved? How do you see it working?
Well, I have certainly made myself willing to do that. It's obviously a little risky these days, but the stakes are extraordinarily high. I will say that it appears that, particularly from the Biden campaign, that they, as has been from President-elect Biden on down, putting safety first. And so they are not encouraging people to do this. They're trying to do it remotely as much as is possible. So at this point, it looks like whatever I might get involved with, if I'm lucky enough to be asked, and frankly, I hope there's no need to be asked. And thus far, it doesn't appear that need will arise. It will probably be in a virtual format. But if it takes going somewhere, things are important enough that I think it's worth doing.
So long ago, you assisted on a recount. I've been involved in a recount as a candidate. Do you have some sense of what it would take to overturn 7,000 votes in Georgia?
Well, it would be immense. As you know, it's a recount, whether it's on a small local race to a statewide or national race. Usually it doesn't change the outcome hardly at all, unless that difference is in the tens of votes, perhaps, maybe in the low hundreds. But the elements you should be looking for, without getting into the political piece of it, is were there people who had their right to vote denied? Was anybody that was illegally allowed to vote? Was were an error in tabulation? And then even if something happened like that, and there have been no actual allegations of that thus far from the Trump campaign, would that error actually be something that's called an impactful remedy, where it would actually make a difference in the outcome? Those are the things the average person should be looking out for in assessing the current allegations.
Mayor, we have to go, but a yes or no question. Do you see any of these cases going to the Supreme Court?
Well, there's, I think, a different question. Do I see any succeeding? And the answer is absolutely not. Right now, the Trump campaign is 0 for 9. I believe they filed a 10th yesterday in Arizona late, which appears to be a replication of one that was already dismissed. It might go to the Supreme Court for a request that the Supreme Court review it, but I would be shocked if the Supreme Court acted on it in a way that was to impact the outcome of the election and turn it against President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris.
Okay, Mayor Scott Slifka, thanks so much for joining us. And now,
thank you very much.
Now for some perspective from the Republican side.
Attorney John Pavia teaches law at Quinnipiac University. He was a member of the Bush legal team in the 2000 Florida recount that we all remember. Mr. Pavia, how big of an army of lawyers does it take to challenge the results in all these states at one time?
Oh, I don't know how they're going to do it. I mean, in 2000, just Florida and having the required number of attorneys we needed back then was hard enough. So I don't know how they're going to do it in 5 to 6 states. It's going to be very hard.
So, but tell us, you were 1-to-1 with a Gore person I guess in front of a judge. Tell us what you actually did.
Yeah, so in 2000, the way it worked was in the two counties that we actually had a full recount. It was a big room of people, sort of like you've seen in Pennsylvania. And at each table, you have a Gore person and a Bush person. And if a ballot came up that they both looked at and one of the chads or one of the ovals wasn't sufficiently filled in or punctured, what would happen is they would then send that to our desk. And one of the two of the lead attorneys, one for Bush, one for Gore, and the judge from that county would discuss whether or not you could tell the intent of the voter. And really 99% of the time you could. So there wasn't all that much dispute when those ballots got to that desk.
Interesting.
Did you get a few extra votes for George W. Bush?
I know we got a few for, I mean, each side, actually, the numbers change, but not enough. I mean, when I think about that and then think about what President Trump has to do this time around, it's really going to be hard to I heard your last interview, to get the number of votes changed is going to be really hard. They're going to have to attack it in a different way.
Mr. Pavia, 3 of the current Supreme Court justices worked on that Bush recount team, John Roberts, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett. Do you think in any way their experience there might inform their decision-making if a case did make it to the Supreme Court, or if a request makes it to the Supreme Court?
Yeah, I just heard that, actually, that the 3 of them were down there. I hope they weren't on my team. But I do. I think it's going to hurt President Trump in a way, in that I think having been down there, you hear we were hearing all these stories about these, ballots being stuffed in bags and whatnot. And this was back in 2000, and going to polling places where the directions were at the polling places were intentionally misleading to mislead the voters on how to vote. Then you get there and there was nothing there, so I think the way it's going to shape them is if a case gets to them based on some kind of voter fraud, they're going to be harder, I think, on the Trump side to say, look, you got to really establish that it was fraud, because if they were down there, they saw the amount of stories that were, sort of exaggerated and inflated. So I think the standard of evidence is going to be very high. And by the way, I do think the Pennsylvania case is going to come back, where the judge sort of unilaterally extended the date in Pennsylvania by 3 days.
When you say come back
to the Supreme Court, I think the court really couldn't do anything. Well, they were deadlocked 4-4. Alito had a decision which was pretty clear where the 4 of them stood. I think that case is going to come back, and I think now they've got a full court now.
All right. Well, we will be paying attention to that. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.